We'd mentioned this already in Europe, but during the war, there was this fear that anything that didn't contribute to the war would cause the war to be lost. So everything in society was bent to try to help fight the war: industry, economy, and in this case, civil liberties. The government used a great deal of propaganda, right? And propaganda is when the government sends out lots of media trying to change public opinion on a subject. It isn't always truthful. It's usually full of stereotypes and is full of exaggeration. It's designed to dehumanize the enemy, and that's exactly what was going on here. The American population really embraced this propaganda, and everything that was German was attacked. Food was renamed, so you couldn't buy sauerkraut. You could buy Liberty cabbage. You couldn't buy bratwurst, but you could buy victory sausage, right? So silly things like that, but it gets less silly and more serious. Books are burned during this time period. Germans are going to be lynched if they stepped out of line, right? If they put any sympathy towards Germans or Germany in the war effort. The United States went past that and passed the Espionage Act. First time since the 1798 Espionage Act was passed. This was deliberately designed to silence critics of the war. And one of the biggest critics of the war was the working class. The socialist leader, Eugene V. Debs, was arrested and tried and put in prison for 10 years for criticizing the war. The Supreme Court upholds his sentence. Here's what he said. He gave a speech that said, the working class who fought all the battles, the working class who make the supreme sacrifices, the working class who freely shed their blood and furnish the corpses, have never yet had a voice in either declaring war or making peace. It is the ruling class that invariably does both. They alone declare war and they alone make peace. Debs and other socialists are going to try to convince the working class not to fight the war, arguing that it's really just kind of a trick by the wealthy to make more money by selling weapons. In the Supreme Court case Shenk versus the United States, Shenk, a German immigrant, criticized the war. He was also a working class man, said working class men shouldn't be drafted. He's going to be arrested, put on trial, jailed for 10 years. His case goes all the way to the Supreme Court. He argues that he has a First Amendment right to say whatever he wants and that he can't be punished, essentially challenging the Espionage Act. The Supreme Court decides that his speech was a clear and present danger, that by encouraging folks not to allow the draft to be drafted, the United States might lose soldiers, which means they might lose the war. So his speech was a clear and present danger, and he does not have that right, because even in the Bill of Rights, our First, Second, Third Amendments do have limitations. They're not maximally applied, at least according to the Supreme Court. The war was also a great excuse for limits on immigration, especially those new immigrants, the ones from the South and Eastern part of Europe, the ones that were visibly different than the old immigrants of the Germans and the Irish. Now, obviously, we're at war with the Germans, but many of the German immigrants had assimilated. The Immigration Act of 1917 included a literacy test. Where have we heard of literacy tests before? Yeah, that's right, the Jim Crow laws in the South. So the United States policy, while we would like to think is limited just, that Jim Crow law was limited just to the South and everybody else kind of gets away with it. No, the United States had an official policy of literacy tests for all immigrants, designed to try to limit those from places that they thought were undesirable, the South and the Eastern section of Europe. They also totally excluded Asian immigrants, except some from the Philippines and Japan. But again, there's a lot of racism involved in the immigration policy during this era, and we can see it bleeding through in that Immigration Act of 1917.